Do not come. Do not come.
I'm gonna come.
We are also praying for the people of Puerto Rico. We love Puerto Rico. And we also love Puerto Rico.
Seconds remaining. We always gotta let the song finish. This is too damn good. Boom. Boom. Hello, everyone. This is Rolo, the Puerto Rican Pistolero, and welcome to, can you believe it? It's episode 3 of Rolo's Rants. I'm going to give that another applause over here. There I have 33 people in here. That is awesome. Hope you guys enjoy the intro music as usual. It is a pleasure to be here. Last week was a pretty awesome episode. I really enjoyed having conversations with you guys. We saw some great things happening in the chat, a lot of support, a lot of positivity. And that's something that I want to keep going here. I know in the past, if you've watched me for, as long as I've been on YouTube, I tend to be an optimistic catastrophist, but a lot of times I'm pretty cataclysmic in the things that I talk about. But if I've learned anything over, the recent course of my own personal history, it's that you need to have some hope and some positivity. So that's going to be the theme of today's show. It's going to be hope. We'll go into a little bit more hope later, but I did miss out on a topic last week. It's maybe not as timely this week, but obviously SHOT Show happened about 2 weeks ago. For those of you that don't know, SHOT Show is the gun industry's largest trade show. Typically only manufacturers, gun companies, and media are able to attend. It's not open to the public. And it is definitely one of the greatest events that a gun-loving person can go to. I was fortunate enough to go last year in 2020, or not last year, I should say several years ago in 2020. And it was a great experience. Went with our friend Argo J, a friend of the show, and he was unveiling a new rifle. Got to meet a lot of awesome people and attend a lot of events. And the best part of SHOT Show, in my opinion, is, well, it's smoking cigars and having some bourbon with your buddies. But aside from that, it is, man, Greg the Goblin. Look at that. Greg the Goblin dropping the 20. He's the man, the myth, the legend. You can set your watch to Greg the Goblin. He just drops that 20 on the table every time and says, "Let's freaking go." Thank you so much, Greg. I appreciate you for being such a great supporter over the last couple of years, especially. So SHOT Show, great event for the firearms industry. It's changed a little bit over the years. Some people say it's gotten worse. I don't know. I've only been once, so I can't really speak to that. But things that we can speak about are some of the amazing products that have dropped, that were announced at this year's SHOT Show. So I'm going to go through what I think are some of my favorite ones, thanks to living vicariously through various friends that went, and through the firearm blogs. Fantastic coverage. So as you guys know, I love firearms. I buy too many of them. There's some that I bought that I haven't even shot yet, which is a terrible shame. But that doesn't mean that I can't keep looking and desiring even more. When you've got, I used to have an even Rocket Sauce. What is this? Rocket Sauce comes out of nowhere and he says 50. He's dropping the 50, ladies and gentlemen. Holy cow, what a start to the show. Thank you so much for the generosity. So there's only too much if you can't fit them in your place. FMJ JHP 762. But you can always find a lot more space. Thank you so much again, Rocket Sauce. That's awesome. You're the man. Let's see. So I'm trying to look through here which one I really want to start with. Well, we can just kind of go down the line. I do like this breaching shotgun. Like that's actually pretty cool. Let's start with this one. Actually, this is actually a cool product. So let's see. There we go. Look at that. The screen share worked on the first try. So let's zoom into this one. So if you guys know, I have been playing with every Wednesday. It's been, I don't know if that's going to be, set for every Wednesday, but the last couple of Wednesdays I played with Disparu, Epic Mike, and my younger brother, Commander N. We played some Ready or Not, which is an awesome tactical shooter. I would recommend anyone try it if you're into tactical shooters. It's kind of the evolution of the classic, SWAT games and Rainbow Six, with some really awesome scenarios that are very actually very significant when it comes to looking at today's media and things like that. I beat the game solo the other day. We were on that last mission last Wednesday with the boys, and we pretty much got wrecked. But I was able to solo it, and it was very interesting because in the last episode you do find, I'm just going to spoil it right now. You guys will see it, but a group of women that was being trafficked, and when you find them, the feds come on the radio and they tell you to just shut the shipping container and lock it, and that they'll take care of it. Very interesting. Very interesting. I'm not going to comment on that, but you guys know where I'm going with that one. So one of the weapons that you can equip is a breaching shotgun. And, breaching shotguns are actually very cool. They're basically a short-barreled shotgun without a stock, and they're made to breach entryways and breach doors. So Mossberg has busted out with a new version of the 590 M, and as you can see, it's got that awesome. It looks like almost like a. It looks like almost a badass muzzle brake, like you could just beat somebody with it in the front, or you could just bust it out. And it's pretty awesome. Look at that. We've got Aaron Fever. I haven't seen Aaron Fever in a while. It's great to see you, Aaron Fever. I hope you had a good weekend so far. And welcome back, Rebel Scum 1776. I hope you're doing well and that you enjoyed the show last week. I'm glad to see you here again. So, breaching shotguns are kind of a very specialized type of shotgun, being so compact, not necessarily meant as a mainline weapon, but this looks like a pretty badass version of the 590 Shockwave. This one is magazine fed. I actually have never shot a detachable magazine fed shotgun in this configuration. So a pump. I've shot obviously semi-auto shotguns with magazines and things like that, but not like this. So I would actually like to try this out. I mean, to me, so there's a couple of reasons why you buy a weapon. Actually, there may be multiple reasons why you buy it. You can buy a classic weapon because you want to own, a piece of history. So, older lever actions, muskets, things like that, breech block rifles, even, obviously vintage war trophies and things like that. So you buy that for their historical value. You also buy it for the second thing, which is the coolness factor. And then you would buy a gun for practicality and, self-defense. But let's be honest, it's the coolness factor that everybody loves. And I think that this gun right here has a badass coolness factor from the receiver. I love that bronze looking receiver. It looks kind of like FDE. So FDE / bronze on this screen, it looks a little bit more bronze. On the other one, it looks more FDE. So I've always loved that style. And the 590 is just a proven shotgun. The Marine Corps has used it in combat. Various police units and special forces units have used it throughout the world. So it's a proven design that Mossberg has been, producing here for, at least a couple of decades, I believe. So it does look like a street sweeper. Celluloid Dream. It's a badass looking gun. We can probably play a couple of minutes of the video here just to check it out in action. So it does look pretty sweet.
So that's up to 6 doors. I'm not going to second guess those.
Yeah, it looks pretty sweet. The pump, it looks like a shortened pump with some M-lock slots on it. It's just a sweet, badass looking shotgun, if you ask me. So, I mean, you could use it any way that you want. You could probably use it as a truck gun, a motorcycle gun, things like that. But it's meant more for law enforcement or any sort of, tactical units that need to breach and want something that's, very handy, easy to carry, and lightweight. So that's a pretty sweet gun. So that's kind of the first thing that we'll go over here. There are just so many things. Okay, so this is one that is near and dear to my heart, which is it's the Kel-Tec Sub 2000. Everybody hates on the Kel-Tec Sub 2000. It's one of those guns that's kind of like the high point where you love it because of its memeability, or you hate it because you think it's total trash. And that's kind of what people think about Kel-Tecs. Kel-Tec is near and dear to my heart because they're up in Cocoa Beach, Florida. So that's, up near Orlando and Cape Canaveral area. They're really known for producing a lot of strange and innovative weapons. So their pocket pistol comes to mind, the Kel-Tec P3AT. So it's a 380 pocket pistol. Ruger kind of copied the design. I don't want to say they stole it because I love Ruger too, but they definitely took the design of the P3AT to develop the Ruger LCP line of pistols. I actually have a Ruger LCP too, which is actually a really great pocket pistol. If you ask me, I carry one all the time. It's pretty reliable. They now have the stack and a half version. So, and what I've heard, people say P3ATs are pretty solid too. If you want something very portable, concealable, a lot of times they even have that little belt clip that's on them. I'm not sure I would carry it that way, but it's still pretty cool. Now the Sub 2000, it probably wasn't the first, but it was one of the really well-known folding carbine designs. You can get it in 40 Smith & Wesson or 9mm. But one of the big design flaws with this gun was the fact that you've got that nice Picatinny rail up top for mounting an optic, but in the Gen 1 and Gen 2 versions of the Kel-Tec Sub 2000, it folded in on itself. So obviously, if you had an optic on top, that wouldn't work. So you needed to get some sort of, some sort of mechanism to be able to move that optic to the side, which could affect your zero. It just never worked out that well. That's another accessory that you need. I personally love this gun. I bought it. It was one of the first carbines that I bought. I got a version that can take Glock magazines, and it's got the shorter grip, so it can take pretty much any 9mm Glock magazine that's a double stack. And it's a tack driver. It's great for if you're doing shooting steel, or if you're doing any sort of 3-gun competition where they allow you to use 9mm carbines, or PCCs as we call them. So, oh, there goes the speaker. If you guys know, so an SMG, because I know we have a lot of people that aren't necessarily gun people in the chat. SMGs are your submachine guns. So that is a small, lightweight carbine, usually with a shorter barrel, but it can be up to 16 inches if you're a civilian, because those are the rules here, else it's considered an SBR. It allows you to they shoot pistol caliber bullets at a high rate of fire. They're very light, they're very handy. The HK makes probably the most famous one, the MP5. B&T makes the APC9. You've got the UMP45 and the UMP9. There's a lot of them out there. The Chris Vector, for all my video game fans, is an awesome one. I shot that full auto before in 45. Fantastic. So the Sub 2000 is what you call the semi-automatic version of an SMG, is a PCC, or a pistol caliber carbine. It's not as cool as an SMG, but it is pretty sweet. So Sub 2000 folds. Gen 1 and Gen 2 folded over the top. So if you had an optic, it would be an issue. But the Gen 3, they finally resolved that issue. And you can fold it and twist it over. Hammer's a great guy. I met him before at a couple of different events. So now you can see that it rotates when it folds. So this is pretty much resolved the biggest flaw that the earlier Sub 2000s had. Now, I want to know how reliable it is, because having a rotating mechanism on a plastic gun, because let's be honest, the Sub 2000 is just a metal tube. You take off the pick rail and the M-lock slots off of it. It's literally just a metal tube with a buffer spring in the back. That's all it is. It's a blowback operated. It's about as simple as you can get when it comes to the design of a firearm. There are probably pipe guns out there. If you played Fallout 4 or any of the Fallout games, and you're in that weapon bench and you're making a pipe gun, that's basically what a Sub 2000 is, except it's got plastic furniture on it that makes it look a little bit cooler. It looks kind of like a gator, especially because Kel-Tec uses that textured plastic on it. But it's a sweet gun. It's very handy. It folds, into a compact package. Smith & Wesson makes their own kind of version of it, but it folds sideways, which makes a lot of sense as well. It's probably a simpler mechanism. It takes, obviously, Smith & Wesson M&P magazines. So I love it. I think it's great for competition. It could be a good truck gun. I know somebody mentioned it in the chat that it came in 10mm. I think if it came in 10mm, it would be a great weapon for a lot of different situations. A backpacking gun, if you're out in bear country, or you're worried about wolves, things like that, 10mm Sub 2000 would be great. But 9mm has actually killed a lot of dangerous animals, not just the two-legged variety. So don't sleep on it. Having a gun on you is better than having no gun at all. And if you've got something like this and you get the big stick Glock magazines with, 25, 28 rounds in them, that's a pretty formidable piece of firepower. So I recommend it. I upgraded mine with M-Carbo triggers and different, now it has a metal trigger, I believe, the Gen 3. So I upgraded my trigger. Upgraded the charging handle to a heavier one so that it kind of, reduces the felt recoil. So it's not, banging on you there. It kind of slows, it probably slows down the rate of the cyclic rate, even though it's not an automatic weapon a bit. But it's a comfortable gun, great for competition shooting, and it's a great companion to a Glock pattern pistol. So I would definitely recommend it if anybody wants it. They usually, you can probably find a Gen 2 now for about $350, so they're relatively inexpensive. So if you want to get into the carbine game, it's a pretty cheap way to go. And at this point, it's kind of a reliable, proven design. G-Webs in the chat. It's been a long time, G-Webs. We got to talk about AI generated art, because I love the art that you produced for SHOT Show with the dogs and the van. It was fantastic. So let's see what the next one is here. Whoa, this does look pretty cool. Okay, Diamondback Firearms, an AR with wooden furniture. You've got the front handle. It looks like a Thompson. You got looks like the D50 PMag magazine. $1,700. That's actually, that's honestly not that bad. It looks like you've got the flash hider / compensator from a real Tommy gun. And I like how the receiver looks. I do. I really do. It's a smooth receiver. So unlike most AR-15s, it doesn't have the forward assist. So that's actually a pretty sweet looking gun. I'm usually not a fan of wooden furniture on AR style weapons, but there's something about this that I really like. It could be the guitar case that they put it in to give you that extra sense of style. I'm getting Desperado, or what is it? The movie with Antonio Banderas, vibes from it. Man, that looks really sweet. And then they've got a revolver as well. That's actually not a bad looking revolver. Look at that, Cocoa, Florida as well. I didn't know Diamondback. Well, Diamondback usually makes affordable weapons, so it's interesting. Yeah, Desperado. Usually makes affordable weapons. So it's interesting to see them do something like this. And again, another Florida company doing crazy shit. That's what I like to see. This is what we do in Florida. We make crazy weapons. There's a lot of import companies here bringing in weapons from Turkey and things like that. Or in the case of one of my favorite guns, the Streebog SP, what is it? The Streebog SP3, I think, SPA3, I think is what they're at now, which is a roller delayed, SMG PCC style weapon. Very affordable. I have the SP9A1, and it's fantastic. That's one of my favorite PCCs out there. Once they fix the magazine issue with the original one, you've got the curved, kind of banana style looking magazines now. Top notch, and it's a great looking gun. Looks very much like a BNT APC9, which is another fantastic, PCC / SMG. El Mariachi, Once Upon a Time, Mexico. That's right. I think wheel guns are fantastic. As far as reliability, you can't go wrong. Obviously, you can still mess things up. Your capacity is low, but you can carry, pretty heavy caliber pistol rounds. I think 10 millimeter has kind of taken away some of the benefits that you'd get from having a 357 Magnum, or, maybe a 44 Magnum would be a little bit more, but you get a lot of power and velocity from a very small package. They're obviously great for one of the scenarios that a lot of people don't think about. Let's say you're wearing kind of a shirt like this, a button-up shirt, and you're doing an appendix carry. So you've got your gun strapped right over your and you're drawing. It could be every situation that's a self-defense shoot, you're always going to be at a disadvantage unless it's some sort of active shooter situation where you're fortunate enough to see bad guys over here, doing bad things. They don't notice me. I have time to draw and kind of figure out the situation. A lot of times you got to draw in a second. If you have a shirt or anything that gets stuck in a semi-automatic weapon, that slide can get stuck and have the shirt go over it. And if the slide cannot move, that gun is not going to fire. So it's just not going to work. A revolver, especially a hammerless revolver, doesn't have that issue. You can shoot through a cloth and nothing's going to get snagged in there. So that's the benefit of owning a revolver. So for certain situations, certain types of clothing, some people, it's a comfort thing. They just like revolvers because that's maybe what they learned and grew up on. They're great weapons. So I've got a Ruger Super Wrangler that I want to try out. That's a single action only revolver based on the Colt Peacemaker, I believe, and the Ruger Single 6. So I haven't gotten a chance to shoot that, but I definitely want to try it out. Revolvers are pretty sweet, and they're just a lot of fun. And you can kind of do the cool combination like how we talked about with the sub 2000, where you can have your Glock as your pistol and a sub 2000 or another PCC that can take Glock magazines. The original PCC carbine, or I should say the original carbine pistol combo, was having a lever action rifle and a revolver that were chambered in the same ammunition. So you can do that nowadays carrying either a 357 and a 38 special or a 44 Magnum or 44 special, which I actually haven't shot a 44 special before. It's lighter, lighter load. So it's a lot less recoil. Those guns are a lot of fun as well. The cowboy action shooting scene has gotten very popular over the last few years. And it's interesting because some of the prominent entries at SHOT Show were a couple of lever actions made by companies that you would not expect. So, man, I had this one open here earlier. High Point is back. That's always fun. Here we go. So this is Silver Creek Firearms. There were a lot of lever action rifles that came out this year. It could be that maybe it is that, government crackdown is making gun manufacturers a little bit pessimistic. So lever action rifles don't have any restrictions in any state as far as I know. So it would make a lot of sense that, hey, if you still want the power of a rifle in a lot of cases or close to it, if you're using a 30-30 or something like that, that's a rifle rounds that you could use in certain circumstances. Obviously 45-70 is a beast of a round for big game hunting and just all around badassitude. And you get a lot more velocity from a 357 and a 44 Magnum through a carbine with a 16, 18-inch barrel. So I do like them. I personally like them. I know G-Webs is saying new gun owners want new guns. I don't know. There is a factor there that at least I know when I grew up, we're talking about a bunch of dudes that were, 17, 18 years old. Some of my friends were a little bit older. They fought in the War on Terror. And some of the guns that we loved the most, obviously, it's the Mosin Nagant. The Mosin Nagant, everybody had a 1911. Everybody had old school AKs with wood furniture, Wassers and the like. So there was something that we loved about the classics, Browning high powers, all that stuff. So, and there's just something fun. See, I'm the kind of guy that growing up, my old man, and shout out to the old man. I know you guys have loved him on a lot of the gaming streams. Maybe we'll have him on this show one day. I think you guys would have a good time with the banter that he and I have going back and forth. I got most of my political beliefs from him, but I would have to say I'm a little bit more on the libertarian side than he is. So sometimes we clash, and it could make for good stuff. So Henry rifles are great Rebel Scum. I've owned Henrys. I think they're fantastic. The Golden Boy is one of my favorite guns that you can get that's very affordable. So I think they're great. I do think they're great. I do love the innovation, but I absolutely love the classics. And I think that there's nothing wrong with going with a proven design. I mean, when you think about it at this point, the AR-15 is essentially a classic firearm. It's been around for over 60 years. And it's pretty crazy to think about that. But that's pretty much where we are. Guns have not necessarily advanced. I think where we're going to start seeing innovations is in the manufacturing of firearms and really the ubiquity of suppressors and things like that. So I think optics, suppressors, that kind of technology has really been what's pushed firearms further. So over 70, that's right. Yeah, because that was in the 50s. So at this point, I forget, we're in 2024. So it's over 70 years since the AR-15 was designed. So yeah, I think lever actions are here to stay. I think we'll see newer. We've already seen tactical lever actions. That's nothing new. They've been around for 10 or 12 years at this point. I think some of these designs. So these Thunder Ranch shotguns, I definitely want to check it out. I love Mossbergs. I think Mossbergs are great shotguns. So great to see it. Oh, chassis for a Tikka. I own a Tikka. This isn't really anything exciting. Hunting rifles, bolt actions aren't anything crazy. But if you get into PRS, precision rifle shooting, ultra long distance shooting, then chassis are very important to you. You can take a gun that off the shelf, maybe a sub MOA rifle, and or at least around that 1 MOA mark. And for people that don't know, MOA means minute of angle. So typically what you're talking about is a 1 MOA gun means it'll shoot a 1-inch group. So that means all your bullet impacts, your points of impact will be within an inch of one another at 100 yards. And then you can say, as that goes out, that's going to be 2 inches at 200, 3 inches at 300, et cetera, et cetera. You can also measure in mils. My scopes are, for the most part, now in mils. Mils are actually a little bit easier. I'm not going to go into ballistics and how that works. That's not really this isn't the show for that, but that's pretty much when somebody mentions MOA, sub MOA, anything like that, it's a 1-inch group at 100 yards. So there's your little factoid for the day. So I'm making up for the lack of firearm content in the last episode today. So I'm busting out the school teacher, showing you different stuff. So yeah, Tikka T3, I think it's one of the finest actions for a bolt action rifle, definitely that I've ever used. I personally own a Tikka T3X Super Light with a stainless steel barrel. So pretty much this looks like the same receiver and barrel combination, just in this precision chassis. So that actually looks pretty good. I do like the stock that I have. Tikka stocks are a little bit, they're not that comfortable, but I haven't had issues with mine. It's a 6.5 Creedmoor, and then I have a Savage 110 Ultralight that's got a proof carbon fiber barrel. That barrel is sweet. That one's in 308, but you can't compare the action. The Savage action it's like comparing a Toyota Corolla to a Lexus. That's really what it is. You've got they're both fine, they're both reliable, but you really can't compare the how refined the Tikka T3X. It's a Seiko action, and Seiko makes some fantastic bolt action rifles. Looks like EAA was making some 2011 style. Well, they're calling it a 2311. So that's just a modernized version of the 1911 with a double stack magazine. And Canik. It looks like they've got their Terran Tactical. I love Canics as well. They're a Turkish manufacturer. I think that when it comes to striker-fired weapons, I'm not going to go into striker versus hammer. It's like it's an internal mechanism. You have a striker that hits a firing pin, and then that makes the round go off instead of a hammer, like in a 1911 or a Beretta 92. Things like that, or revolver, for example. Glocks are obviously striker-fired weapons. I think that of all striker-fired pistols that I've personally shot, Canics have the best triggers out of the box. You can obviously get trigger jobs for different weapons, but it's not much better than this. So Scooby Digit says Palmetto State Armory's new 570 modular shotguns look interesting. I've had good experiences with Palmetto State Armory. They actually have a line of weapons that's a little bit more premium. So those rifles kind of run at like the $1,000 range. And from what I've heard from people that have shot them before, they're a little bit more refined. They're good. I think that if you're building an AR and you want it to be affordable and decently reliable, you can't really go wrong with a PSA. I've kind of gone towards Aero Precision. I like the way that their guns look, and they're a little bit, I would say they're definitely a step above PSA. They're not Daniel Defense or Bravo Company manufacturing or anything like that, but they would be there. Night Train says a PSA Jackal would be on my bucket list. I think that's a great looking gun. It's kind of a one-off, so it would definitely be like a luxury gun. Not in its price, because I think the price point is pretty good. More in like, I don't really need it because I don't have any use for it. It just looks cool. You get that ACR vibe, and it's a pretty sweet looking gun. So I'm trying to think of what else we saw here. Again, a lot of those retro guns. This Matador Arms actually upper receiver and magwell combo for, I believe it's AR style 9mm PCCs is actually pretty sweet. I think it looks pretty awesome, and the price point's actually pretty good. I believe it's like $800 for the entire upper receiver, which is not too bad, especially if you already have, your setup. Winchester did come out with a cheap 22 long rifle lever action to kind of compete against Henry. In my opinion, at first glance, it seemed like it was good, but it's made in Turkey. So I always get annoyed. Winchester kind of does this. They've got their SXP shotguns, which aren't bad either, but you're getting a price point that is close to close to what Henry provides in an American-made gun, and it's not an American-made gun. So I don't really see the appeal there. I'm sure that they're decent. It's an aluminum receiver, not anything crazy. I would go ahead and just get a regular basic Henry rifle. Or obviously the MSRP is around $419, I think. You're going to find it on the street for probably less than $400. Save up your money and get something a little bit nicer. I like the octagonal barrel Henrys, and I think that those will serve you better. And it's more of something that you can kind of give down. But if you want, I guess, something you can throw around and plink with, that's probably okay. I just wish it was American made. Rossi's another manufacturer of lever actions. Mini 14 is back with the folding stock. I think that's cool. People kind of hate on the Mini 14. It's a cool gun. You can shoot 7.62 by 39, which is pretty rare in American weapons, and 5.56. And you kind of get around all the bullshit gun laws that a lot of states have because it's got wood, so you don't have to worry about it. Even though you shoot the same rounds that an AR-15 shoots, because the silhouette is different. It's not a scary black rifle. It's got wood furniture. It circumvents all that stuff. It's pretty stupid. But if you live in a state where you have these kinds of infringements on the Second Amendment, it is it's a great way. It's a great alternative, and it'll give you the ability to shoot real rifle rounds without any of the painful paperwork or anything like that. And obviously it looks like the M14. That's the whole point. That's why it's called a Mini 14. So, people like that. They think it's pretty cool. Michifornia. Michifornia is not as bad as other places, but Whitmer would obviously like to make things pretty bad for you guys there. Desert Tech makes pretty cool. I like the MDR. That's their bullpup rifle. This is more of an SBR version, and it's pretty cool. So the benefits of a bullpup, just for, again, I'm in kind of teacher mode here, are that you can fit the same length of barrel as a regular rifle in a smaller package because your trigger control group is in front of the magazine. So if we're looking at this firearm here, you can see that the magazine is towards the back. You can see this. Games like Halo and other games have this. Obviously, the Steyr AUG from a ton of movies is a bullpup. It wasn't the first bullpup, but it's probably the most famous bullpup. The FAMAS, the Tavors that are made in Israel, those guns are all bullpups. Keltec makes bullpups because, of course, they would. The RDBs and the RFBs are what they're called. So it allows you to have kind of the package of a submachine gun with a longer rifle barrel, shooting rifle calibers, and you get the benefit. It's good for close quarters, things like that. The shortcoming, obviously, is when you've got the trigger that far. When you have the trigger forward of the magazine, you've got a bar that essentially initiates it to hit the firing pin on the bolt and to push the sear. That mechanism, because it's pushing against something that's very long, those triggers tend to be mushy. They don't feel as good. And if you're left-handed, some bullpups can be a pain in the butt because you've got your shell casings flying right where your cheek is going to be. You can usually flip which side the ejection is, but if you do that, then somebody that's right-handed is going to have issues with it. So I personally like downward ejection. Not many bullpups do that for some reason. I think if crap gets stuck, it's a little bit more difficult to deal with. The Keltecs are downward ejection, so that's why they would appeal to me personally. But it's a cool design. I think it looks pretty slick. It does look like, bullpups, even though they've been around for more than 40 years at this point. I believe that the AUG came out in the 70s. They still look like futuristic guns, and you see them in video games all the time. You see them in science fiction movies. The P90 is another famous bullpup design that Stargate really made famous, and it's just a fantastic looking gun that really fits. I think the only gun that's not a bullpup that kind of has that same a style and aesthetic would be the Vector, the Chris Vector. So pretty cool looking guns overall. This thing looks crazy. That's a bullpup kind of AR design. That's really bizarre looking. So, I mean, and there you go. There's the Gen 3 Vector. Oh, man, with the 16-inch barrel, it just doesn't look right. I mean, that looks like an integrally suppressed Vector. So here's the Vector that we know and love. So Vector, also pretty famous, extremely high cyclic rate. So that means the rate of fire, rounds per minute, very high. It's just it's a sweet looking gun. They can take Glock magazines. They come in 9, 40, 10 millimeter, 45. They basically make it in everything. They're a little bit expensive, and white, they look fantastic. You get those nice Call of Duty vibes there. So pretty sweet looking gun for the video game crowd. It gives you that kind of cool factor. And sometimes that's all you want in a gun. You just want to look freaking cool. And I mean, that's kind of it. There were a lot of other things. I know G-Webs was there. If you have anything else that you saw, G-Webs has been around the block several times, but he's an innovator. He's been doing this for a long time. You thought the Vector was ugly, Greg? I mean, it could be an acquired taste. It's a little bit chunky, that's for sure. Daniel Defense came out with the H9. That was the Hudson H9. Staccato is Staccato. They make 2011s. They're some of the nicest guns that you'll ever shoot. They're outrageously expensive, but man, they shoot so flat. The Club 22 Lamfire. Let's look that up. Let me bring this over here. Club 22 Slamfire. Okay, let me see that. Let's check that out. Ta-ta-ta. Ta-ta-ta. Ta-ta. 22 Slamfire. Let's see. Is it a pump action 22? You have to, if you got a link somewhere, you can show me, because I can't find that here right now as I'm searching for it. But we'll see that later if we can find it. And I mean, that's kind of it. I didn't see too much at range day that looked really, really awesome. It just seems like, innovations in the gun industry have been kind of interesting lately. We're not seeing too much. We changed tactical to Mountain Billy and are making a scaled down 22 AK. We tactical changed and are a scaled down 22 AK. Really? 22 AK. Let's see. That sounds pretty interesting. Mountain Billy. This is back to the days where we look up cool guns and talk about them. It's been a long time. There we go. Mountain Billy Lab. It teases AK-47 style lightweight rimfire. That looks really cool. I do like that. That is really sweet. So it's an 80% scale AK-47 that shoots 22, and it only weighs 3.5 pounds. I like it. That does look really cool. It's like some weird bastard child of an AR-15 and an AK and a 1022. So obviously you've got an AK style receiver and bolt. You've got a monolithic upper rail on top, and you've got your M-lock. So it looks like it's still piston driven. From what I can see, it looks like it's got the same gas system as a regular AK. So that is pretty sweet. That is sweet. And then obviously you've got the classic M4 style stock in the back. That does look pretty cool. It does. That is cool. A baby K. Yeah, I guess that is. That actually is really cool. Look, I'm a big rimfire guy. I don't have my bullets. I don't have all my rounds next to me right now, so I can show the folks all the different rounds out there. Actually, they're not that far away. I should get them. Look, we're going to continue this lesson. Awkward pause while I check this out, because I need my learning tools here. The school is now in session, so we're going to try this as well as we can. So, of course, we don't have them accessible here. So, this is the awkward pause moment of the class where we try to figure out what we're doing here, and we pull different things out. So, let's see. We got some 22 here. So, I don't have all my other rounds with me, but I do have, because I was going to go to the range, my big old box of 22 rimfire here. So I got some Winchester 22. This is like a 300 round box or something like that. So this is what a 22 rimfire is, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get the bigger show camera here going. So 22, it's a nice small round. You can use it for, you know, shooting varmints, squirrels, things like that, rabbits. If you're dealing with pest problems, you can even shoot coyotes if you need to. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but shot placement is everything. I've seen people take out hogs with them as well. They're just a lot of fun, extremely low recoil, extremely cheap. Back before the ammo apocalypse, they were like 2-3 cents a round. They're closer to 7 to 10 cents a round now, but still fantastic. And any gun that shoots it, it's great. Low recoil, not very loud. You can get subsonic rounds easily. There will be a Rolo rant. I'm making up for the lack of gun content for the last couple of weeks. So 22s are fantastic. It's one of my favorite rounds. It's kind of a general all-purpose round, in my opinion. You could use it in an SHTF situation if you needed to. It wouldn't be the best because you're not going to get penetration range, things like that. But you can carry thousands of rounds in the space that you could, anything else, 223. 308, anything like that. It's going to be totally different. So thanks for that suggestion, G-Webs. That was good. So I think that's pretty much it. We've covered a lot of what SHOT Show had to offer there. If you guys find any other cool guns that you want me to talk about, I can definitely look into them. I know I've been saying, I was going to go to the range today. I actually had something really cool that I can't talk about. It's kind of a side project that has to do with one of my favorite video games of all time in a show that is going to be coming out here in a couple of months. So as I get more information, I will be able to let you guys know what that's all about. But I know there's at least one person in the chat that knows what's up with that, and they're pretty excited about that. So that's what we've got. So I did want to bring up, Last Cuomo Sexual did bring this to my attention last week, and I thought it was very interesting. If you guys watched the previous show that existed on this channel, Locked and Loaded Latinos, you may know that we had the patron saint of 3D printing guns. Unfortunately, the episodes are not available now. I wish I could bring it up. I may clip parts of that episode out because I think what Alex had to say was fantastic. It was the top watched episode of the show until, we kind of hit the Geeks and Gamers bump back in the day. So, but Alex is a 3D printing firearm extraordinaire. Goes by Control P Online. And it seems that the 3D printing gun space has actually spread further to the point where rebels in Myanmar that are fighting against the government there have been using 3D printed FGC 9s, which if you watch that, we talked about the FGC 9 on that episode. And it's extremely fascinating to see. This is really what I think the future of firearms technology is. It is 3D printing guns, manufacturing guns on your own using off-the-shelf parts. Obviously 3D printers as well. That's not necessarily off the shelf, but they're pretty ubiquitous nowadays. You can get an Ender 3 Pro, which at this point is a pretty old school printer. Some of the newer ones are even better. They print a lot faster. They're more efficient with their filaments. And they just give you more advanced features overall. So let's go through this article that, again, Last Cuomo Sexual, thank you for bringing this up, and we'll go ahead and check this out. This is from August of last year, but there's an updated article as well from last December that Myanmar rebels rely on 3D printed guns to fight against the military junta. So let's bump this up so you guys can read it along too. When a German Kurdish gun designer posted his designs for a semi-automatic pistol on DefCAD, that's a 3D gun design repository. Did he realize his FGC-9 design would wind up being printed in huge numbers by rebels in Myanmar? By virtue of the distributed nature of the internet and the low cost of desktop 3D printers, that's exactly what happened. 3D printing firearms in Myanmar. In response to a military coup on February 1st, 2021, civilian rebels in the nation have begun fighting the armed forces known as the Tatmadaw in an attempt to regain control of the country. In contrast to the official military, the rebels' lack of access to mass manufactured weapons has led them to turn to 3D printing. And yep, that's the FGC-9 right there. That is pretty crazy. That's wild, man. That is wild. That's a really nice one, too. Jay Stark, 1809 releases FGC 9, meaning the Fuck Gun Control 9. Designed on DefCAD in 2020, the weapon features upper and lower receivers, pistol grip, and stock that are all 3D printable. The barrel is designed to be made via electrochemical machining, or ECM as we call it. Together, the device is estimated to have a single overhead cost of about $300 to $500, with an estimated $200 for the printer and $100 for the machining equipment. J Stark 1809 suggested that it took 1.5 to 2 weeks to build. Moreover, since J Stark posted the weapon and it was shared on other websites like Odyssey, others have improved the design to make it more customizable and printable, including a 3D printable trigger system for the fire control. That's pretty awesome. This isn't the first time that civilians of Myanmar have may have been exposed to 3D printing. MakerBot advertised the use of their systems to 3D print farming equipment in 2016. Reports of 3D printed weapons began being used against the junta date back to as far as December 2021, meaning that they've been battle tested for at least a year and a half. According to some reports, the guerrilla fighters have developed methods for producing the guns in mass, likely reducing costs and assembly time. J Stark's ideology. Revisiting the idea of whether or not J Stark 829 believed his design would wind up in the hands of a rebel force, the fact of the matter is that he did. In a 2020 documentary by Popular Front, which we actually discussed on this channel back in the day, filmmaker Jake Hanrahan met up with the gunsmith who told him the right to bear arms is a human right. The government or the entity that has rule over you has an executive force. The police, the military, they have firearms. To be able to escape that injustice, citizens need to have the same force on an individual level. I would recommend that everyone check this video out. It's actually pretty awesome. I'm going to post it here in the chat so you guys can all see it. And there you can see the gun taken down. The following year, the Federal Criminal Police Office in Germany found J Stark, a 28-year-old man named Jacob D., and raided his home. 2 days later, he was found in his car in front of his parents' home, dead of a heart attack. Though such an ailment is uncommon for someone at such an age, the coroner ruled out foul play. 3D printed guns and gun control. Yeah, God rest his soul. The story of the rebels in Myanmar brings up a number of salient points. One of them is the fact that 3D printed weapons have come to be powerful enough that they may be effective when using guerrilla warfare. As we've reported, DIY gunsmithing need not rely wholly on 3D printing to be effective, and in most cases is more useful in combination with other techniques or manufacturing technologies. However, as metal filament becomes more prevalent, the need to rely on other fabrication processes will be less necessary. We also know that military manufacturers are actively working on the ability to deploy 3D printing on the front lines of war. One small firm, for instance, has developed an anti-drone weapon specifically for 3D printing. In Ukraine, 3D printed drones have proven to be useful tools as well. In this way, a civil war in Myanmar serves as a field test for 3D printed guns and in turn may inform military planning globally. Man, those are some sweet colors too. Look at that. Oh man, that is awesome. Moreover, because the fight of the civilians of Myanmar is typically seen as a noble one, as are most stories of resistance against a military coup, this topic introduces a contradiction for some gun control advocates. Those who might stand on the side of guerrilla fighters may see the ability to manufacture weapons as necessary in a fight to restore democratic governance in a country. While many might not expect the same fate to befall a developed nation like the U.S., it is a possibility that would favor gun rights advocates. Therefore, there may be a middle ground of sensible regulation that both sides of the issue could potentially agree on. Thanks to the dogged work of senior analyst Vanessa Listek, 3dprint.com has been the only outlet, mainstream or trade media, that has been keeping track of arrests related to DIY guns, reporting that they've doubled from 2022, now totaling 108 with a year. In most cases that we've recorded, ghost guns, because ghosts are a scary name. I ain't afraid of no ghosts, have been part of the larger criminal investigations and operations. However, if legislation begins to target the manufacture of weapons outside of otherwise criminal activity, could potentially result in the slippery slope that results in the blah, blah, blah. It won't, because 3D printing at this point is so prevalent and used for so many different things that cat is out of the bag. They're not going to be able to regulate 3D printed guns, nor should they be able to. The realm of science fiction is where we see a lot of this stuff too, where you can see 3D printed weapons, massive factories and production plants, things like von Neumann probes, if you've ever heard of those, basically self-replicating probes that will spread throughout deep space in order to find habitable planets for humanity. So This is a technology that's been around for a few years now. It's become more refined. You guys may recall that I went to an event called Bear Arms and Bitcoin here last year in Miami. I went with Justin Nazaroff. He's the CEO of Phoenix Ammunition, which is the ammo provider that I would recommend you all purchase from. They've started shipping ammunition to California now that California has a bit more freedom than they used to, thanks to some of the some of the cases and rulings that have gone the way of the Second Amendment there. So it's pretty awesome to see how this technology has advanced. They had Mr. Snow and a few other of the top 3D printing gurus there, and they showed some of the techniques including how to create rifling in a barrel using the electrochemical process that we discussed briefly in this article. And you're going to see a lot more. They're even developing electronic or ignition systems, so that you don't necessarily need a hammer or anything like that. You can use a battery. There could be benefits to those kinds of ignition systems rather than your traditional like firing pin system. We'll see in the future how that may work. But as the technology advances, as polymers get better, as metal extrusion printing kind of advances, you're going to see the capability that's never been seen before. And it really harkens back to the early days of gunsmithing when you think about it, when a lot of the top manufacturers of guns in the United States were just doing it, with basic machine tools in a farm. And then those became the Springfield armories that we know of today, the Winchesters, all those kinds of massive companies that now have, huge factories with robotics and other advanced equipment doing those things. But we're kind of going backwards here. And it really goes to the spirit of what the Second Amendment is supposed to be, that everybody should be able to own a firearm. It's a check against tyranny. It's a way to protect yourself. And now this is kind of a great... It's a great coupling of the First and Second Amendment, because the First Amendment should protect your rights to have these designs and be able to, propagate this knowledge, because knowledge is part of the First Amendment. And now that is how it incorporates into the Second Amendment. So I think it's a beautiful marriage. It's something that really can't be stopped. It doesn't matter what people do or what they say. This cat is out of the bag. So we're going to see this occur a lot more. They're going to try to make people scared, like these guns are untraceable, blah, blah, blah. Fact of the matter is that the government is not supposed to have a database that tracks firearms in the first place. So whether criminals are just scratching out the serial number, which if you've been in jury duty and a weapon is involved, that happens a lot. That's technically a ghost gun now too. It's not traceable or anything like that. In a lot of cases, guns are stolen, so you'll never find out who that gun belonged to or anything like that. So to say that the criminal element is going to be, it's going to run rampant, I think it's a little bit ridiculous. Guns that are stolen are used in most crimes anyway. As we know, the government has been more than happy to give away guns to cartels in the past. And the Taliban has billions of dollars of firearms and military equipment that we left when we abandoned Afghanistan the way that we did. So at the end of the day, I'm more concerned about the government giving guns to people that are bad, empowering, terrorist organizations throughout the world, than I am about Americans building their own guns, which they should have every right to. So you guys know how I am when it comes to that kind of stuff. So I am all for technologies that spread freedom and also really are just that perfect combination of different constitutional rights. So fantastic stuff. Thank you, Alaska Homosexual, for that article. That was a great discussion topic. And look at that. We've gone through 1 hour. 1 hour. And it's been all gun topics. It's like this guy really is the Puerto Rican pistolero. This is crazy. We've really gone... The first few episodes, I went political. I talked about religion a little bit last episode, which I may go down a little bit down this path here. But I think that... Again, let's go back to what I mentioned at the beginning of the show, which is hope. Having hope. We live in we do live in pretty dark times now. And like I said, in the past, you've heard me go on my rant and talk about a lot of things, and I give you, the truth, based on the information that I have, the truth with how I feel about things. But a lot of times it's pretty negative. It's pretty negative. And in this world that we live in today, I feel like negativity is everywhere. It really is everywhere. And it's difficult to escape. We have, corrupt government organizations. We have the media. We have our own citizenry and the crap that people talk on the internet and how terribly people treat one another. And I think that we have to find a way to get past that. And it's going to be difficult. Maybe it's too late to get past a lot of the issues that we have, but I think that we have to try. And part of what I want to do on this show now is try to give you hope, try to give you different solutions. Instead of telling you this is the way that it is and this is what's going to happen, how can we try to get away from these things? How can we turn away from these things? So I think that's something that we need to do. It's something that I'm going to try to do here. I'm just one guy. We've got 80 people watching today, which is fantastic. We're getting past the numbers that are close to the numbers that we had in our previous show, and that's fantastic. I'm loving the growth I'm seeing here. I love the discussions. I'm sorry that I can't read the chat as well as I used to, and now as a one-man band, but I love what's going on here, and I think that we do have to have hope. You here in the chat are hope. Faith gives us hope, and I think this is something that we need to really tap into, and we can't forget the foundations of what brought us here. And I can tell you that for me, I lost a lot of hope over the last few months. You guys know the things that have happened to me, and kind of the path that I've gone. I never get into specifics about my personal life, but you can imagine what it's like to go through an experience like that. And the one thing that got me through it was faith and hope. So hope that things would get better, faith in God, faith in myself, faith from others, my family, my friends, and the hope that they gave me, because I knew that I could overcome these things. But sometimes you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes you don't think that you will meet other people that can, make you feel great, give you that support, and that you may have had before. Sometimes you think it's impossible, but I'm here to tell you guys that you need to have hope, because even in my darkest hours, that's the one thing I never lost. There were moments when, how was I going to do a show again? How was I going to focus on these things, talk about this? Like I didn't really care what was going on anymore, especially when you do something with another person for so long. Sometimes you're like, how do I do this? But then I had to remember, this is the passion that I've always had. This is something that I love. And I didn't do this to, play video games on stream all the time. That's fun. That's mostly what I do now. And I have a great time doing that. But that's not why I got into YouTube. That's not why I got into public speaking, why I became a Second Amendment advocate. It was never about having a massive YouTube channel or, getting to hang out with, geeks and gamers or Young Ripa or any of these other people that I've had the opportunity to interact with over the last few years. It was about spreading the message. That's really what it was. And using this message as a catalyst to go on and trying to take a bite out of some of the negativity that I saw out there, because I know sometimes I've been in the chat on other shows and I see a sense of hopelessness or a lot of anger and animosity at the world. And it's easy to be that way. Entertainment's been destroyed. Woke ideology is permeated everywhere. What they've done to children and what they're doing to children in this country is awful. So it's easy to be angry. It's easy to feel hopeless, especially when your voice is being suppressed. But I think we need to have hope in one another, have hope in some of the systems that are being created. The fact that I'm still here, I'm on YouTube. I talk about a lot of things I'm sure YouTube hates. They have not kicked me off yet. So we have to use all of these things in order to spread that message and try to find other like-minded individuals who can help spread that message and try to have some positivity in the world. It doesn't mean being naive. I think you have to always prepare for the worst and hope for the best. It's a pretty common saying, but I think we need to do our best to try to feel that way, because the problem is that a lot of times you can fall into nihilism and despair. And despair is one of the worst places you can be. You don't want to do anything. You don't feel anything. And it's awful, but you have to find the people that can support you. This kind of goes hand in hand with the discussion that I had last week, which I was pretty happy about. And that's pretty much the best advice I can give you. Try to have hope, try to have faith. First, have faith in yourself and have hope in yourself, Because a lot of times that's the barrier that's stopping us here. Doesn't matter how many words of encouragement somebody can give you. If you don't believe in yourself and believe in your own self-value, you're just going to sit there all day in despair and feel sorry for yourself, not want to move forward, not want to do the things that you loved, and sometimes waste your talent, waste your passion, all these things. So that's what you have to do. And you have to, you got to have, you have to open yourself up to it. There's so much out there that is trying to destroy us. And part of it is people want to break your will. People want to break your will because as an individual, your will it can more easily be broken than a group of individuals that have come together. So they want to try to isolate us. They want to try to make you feel alone. They want you to feel this despair, but you can't allow that to happen. You really can't allow that to happen. And it's important that you remember, yourself, what you love, your passions. Use that as an anchor. Use your faith as an anchor, your moral code, and find other people that have these common values. And eventually you'll become more powerful as a group of individuals. So that's what I recommend to all of you. Find your faith, have hope. And, even though we're going to talk about some things that may make you feel pretty bad, you got to have hope, at least hope in yourself that you can survive maybe some of the adversity that's coming forward, because that at least is something that you need, because we do live in dark times. We've seen societies past that have gone through things that are worse than what we're going through right now. Maybe we'll be in the same situation as they were, like the world wars and things like that. But we can come together and we can overcome all of those things. So that's what I have to say there. Swig of water for the working man. All right. So back to the action here. We're going to talk about some of the bigger news items that have occurred really this week, which I think the top story is, of course, the retaliation for the drone strike in Syria, which tragically killed 3 service members. I briefly spoke about that last week. President Sleepy Joe Biden has finally made some retaliatory strikes. You know how I feel about going to war in Iran. I don't think that it would be beneficial for the U.S. to do so. I think it would end up being a quagmire and a distraction. But are there any short-term solutions right now? I personally don't know. I don't see one, and I don't really have any faith in Joe Biden as the commander-in-chief of the U.S. Armed Forces. I don't really think he's not making any of the decisions there as far as I'm concerned, but we'll see. Let's just go straight to the news here, which is from the War Zone, which if you're into the military and military technology is probably one of the better media sites. It is interesting now, though, as they become independent from the Drive, you can see up here that General Atomics sponsors them. So it'll be interesting to see if that sweet military industrial complex bias jumps into their articles. And I've already seen some General Atomics related pieces. So we'll see how long the journalistic integrity of the War Zone lasts. But I prefer to use this as a source for all things military and war than the mainstream media. So let's check it out. Tyler Rogaway is the one that started the website. U.S. airstrikes obliterated munitions storage compound in Syria. Or is this the one I want? Or it's this one. Everything we know about the aftermath of last night's airstrikes. As the U.S. determines what effect 85 strikes against targets in Iraq and Syria did, there were new attacks against Houthi targets in Yemen. So let's go here. Give me 1 second here. I had something that was popping up. Let's push this over here so we can kind of check it out. I'm in the way. Let's move my face over here. There we go. So I'm over here. As the U.S. assesses the results of its first wave of retaliatory strikes against Iranian forces and their proxies in Iraq and Syria, the Tehran-linked militias in the region have delivered mixed messages, vowing revenge, but also saying they don't want to escalate tensions. Interesting. So, the airstrikes carried out in response to the deadly January 28th drone attack on U.S. troops in Jordan killed dozens of Iranian-backed militia fighters as well as civilians, according to claims by Iraq, Syria, Iranian-backed militias, and a monitoring group. The War Zone cannot I independently verify those assertions, and we've reached out to the U.S. military for an updated bomb damage and casualty assessment, which is still being conducted. A U.S. defense official told the War Zone Saturday. As that assessment continues, questions remain about the deterrent value in this first of what are said to be a series of U.S. airstrikes against groups, it says, have carried out more than 160 attacks on its forces in the region. There have been new claims by militia groups of attacks on U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria in the wake of the airstrikes by a mix of B-1B bombers flying from the U.S. and fighter aircraft based in the region. Man, they went with the bones. It's cool to see that B-1s are still around. That's a badass bomber. Like, let's be honest, it's pretty sweet. Meanwhile, the U.S. and allies carried out a new series of airstrikes against the Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen. Regional reaction. The Iraqi al-Nujaba movement confirms that the Islamic resistance will respond to the American aggression in what it deems appropriate at the time and place it determines. The group threatened, according to the Hezbollah-aligned Al-Mayadeen Telegram channel, al-Nujaba is part of the umbrella group of militias known as the Islamic Resistance in Iraq, and notably used language similar to statements made by U.S. President Joe Biden. However, Hussein al-Masawi, spokesperson for the group, told the Associated Press in Baghdad that, quote, "We do not wish to escalate or widen regional tensions," end quote. Oh, that's interesting. The Popular Mobilization Forces in Iraq, a group of largely Shia militias, now part of the Iraqi security infrastructure, but generally acting independently, confirms that the American targeting is a blatant violation of the sovereignty of the Iraqi state and declares its readiness to implement any order from the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, the PMF said, according to Al-Mayadeen. The office of Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani decreed the U.S. airstrikes. The American administration committed a new aggression against the sovereignty of Iraq as the locations of our security forces in the Akashat and Al-Qaim regions, as well as neighboring civilian places, were bombed by several American aircraft. Al-Sudani's office said on Twitter, this blatant aggression led to 16 martyrs, including civilians, in addition to 25 wounded. It also caused losses and damage to residential buildings and citizens' property. Al-Sudani's office disputed comments made last night by White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby that Iraq was informed ahead of time by the U.S. The American side then deliberately deceived and falsified the facts by announcing prior coordination to commit this aggression, which is a false claim aimed at misleading international public opinion and disavowing legal responsibility for this rejected crime in accordance with all international laws and laws. Okay. This aggressive strike will put security in Iraq and the region on the brink of the abyss, and it also contradicts efforts to establish required stability. The U.S. airstrikes, which dropped 125 munitions on 85 targets at 7 locations in Iraq and Syria, was also condemned by Iran, Syria, and the Hezbollah militia in Lebanon. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Nasser Kanani lashed out at the U.S., cautioning that Washington's adventurism will further escalate tensions in the region, according to the official Fars news agency. Kanani said the U.S. airstrikes were an adventurous act and that the strategic mistake will have no result other than the escalation of tension, instability, and insecurity in the region. He added that the aggression is a violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the two countries, international law, and the United Nations Charter. In addition, Kanani blasted the full support of the United States for 4 months on the Israeli relentless bombardment of Gaza and the regime's attacks against Palestinians in the occupied West Bank, as well as assaults against Yemen and violating the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the country. We got Hayden in the chat. Hayden Wayne, it's been a long time, buddy. Great to see you. Syrian officials said the airstrikes were a blatant aerial aggression on a number of sites and towns in the eastern region of Syria and the Iraqi borders, leaving many civilian and military martyrs, injuring others and causing huge damage to private and public properties. A military statement announced. The statement added that the region targeted by the U.S. attacks in eastern Syria is the same where the Syrian army fights remnants of the Daesh terrorist organization, and this affirms that the U.S. is involved and allied with this organization. The U.S. aggression today, Dawn, has no justification, but it is an attempt to weaken the Syrian army's capability to fight terrorism, the statement added. The Iranian-backed Hezbollah condemns the American aggression in Syria and Iraq and points out that it reveals the United States lie in not expanding the conflict in the region. We'll continue this in a second, but I mean, this doesn't seem like a serious strike. I mean, look, I think we're going to continue to see things escalate here. And like I spoke about last week, going to a full-scale conflict with Iran, it was not something that's advisable. You can try to, and again, I think an effective strategy. Look, I'm not for war or anything like that. I try to push back against the military-industrial complex, but the fact of the matter is, things are probably going to escalate, especially if Iran makes certain decisions. This kind of alludes back to Operation Praying Mantis in the 1980s, where Reagan launched ordered attacks against the Iranian military for the after a U.S. frigate was attacked. Gosh, I believe it was the Samuel B. Roberts, and that we destroyed half of the Iranian Navy in about 8 hours or so, I believe. So obviously the Iran of today is different than the Iran of the 1980s, but they develop a lot more drone technology. They have anti-ship ballistic missiles. They can have a larger threat on shipping in the area. You can try to cut off their oil, leaving the Persian Gulf. That's probably going to piss off the Chinese pretty significantly, because China relies almost exclusively on oil in the Middle East. I guess if we want to be really gangster about it, we can try to produce more oil in the U.S. Good luck with that with the Biden administration. Then just try to compensate for whatever we sell, from our domestic reserves to the Chinese or anybody else, if we want to be really capitalistic about it. But, it seems to me, I think, and Hayden, if you want to go back to last week's episode, I kind of gave my assessment of what an invasion of Iran would look like and the difficulties that would ensue. So I think you can try to use economic warfare. You can try to foment a cultural and social revolution there. It's difficult because they don't really have weapons. So, but I think that's really the only way. The Ayatollahs and the clerics' hold on Iran has always been a bit tenuous, especially the last few years. So I think that's really the only way that you can take on Iran in a way that would be mostly beneficial to the U.S. Because if the U.S. were to attack Iran directly, sometimes you hate your neighbor, but when your neighborhood gets attacked, it kind of brings solidarity with people. So even though women's rights are being violated there, religious rights are obviously violated there, if the U.S. attacks and any sort of amount of civilians are killed, or if they decide to invade, that's going to bring solidarity to the Iranian people, and it may actually give their government more life. So you can't really deal with them that way. I would also assume that the Iranians have terror cells and different assets in the United States and Europe that they would activate to launch attacks in the U.S. At home and abroad. Every day we prevent hundreds and maybe even thousands of those attacks, thanks to the work of a lot of great contractors and analysts out there. But, even that, it can be difficult, especially when you have cells that are not communicating, don't leave an electronic footprint. They might use the old school methods of espionage, dead drops, things like that. So it would be difficult to stop all things like that. But if you go all in a war with Iran, you have to assume that things like that are going to happen. Maybe the U.S. mainland may be protected, but that doesn't mean that some of our allies wouldn't have massive risk to themselves. So these are all the things that you need to kind of weigh into. You also need to look at the fact that the Iran nuclear deal obviously was destroyed by the Biden administration. And, there is no incentive. Iran got billions of dollars back in assets that the U.S. had frozen. So there's no doubt that they've used that money to, develop more weaponry and reignite that weapons program. Obviously, the Stuxnet virus, cyber attack from the U.S. and Israel a few years ago destroyed thousands of their centrifuges. That took them back a few years. But I mean, I don't understand why we would assume that China or Russia have not provided the Iranians with nuclear weapons technology, maybe even scientists and things like that. So once you're dealing with, see, this is the difficulty, because a nuclear Iran, even if it's not, they don't have ICBMs or even, portable nuclear weapons. They may have crude nuclear weapons closer to what would be like, 50s and 60s style Russian technology. You can still produce a dirty bomb. You can do things like that. So you can imagine that they could refine radioactive material, put it in a ballistic missile, launch that over Israel or another country in the region, and wreak havoc in ways that may actually be worse than a conventional nuclear weapon. Well, conventional, because nuclear weapons aren't conventional weapons, but a traditional nuclear weapon, because you're going to be spreading fallout over a larger area. The wind is going to be able to take that, and you'll get radiation poisoning, possibly kill crops, and make an area unlivable. So these are all, this is pretty much what you have to look at when you're assessing what we've done with Iran and how poorly Iran has been handled over the last few decades, really. Let's be perfectly honest. And again, this goes back to the consequences of American and European history, that the French and the British basically had exclusive control over the Middle East, and then they cut it up in ways that did not make any sense demographically or culturally. So, you've basically thrown a lot of different ethnic groups and people and religious sects together in countries that have no business of being next to one another, and that would never have wanted to be next to one another. And this is why the Middle East has always been unstable, because the West basically jacked it all up. Now, there have been wars going on between Christians, Jews, and Muslims for 1,000 years, more so, the Crusades and everything like that. But there was some stability in the Middle East when the British and French empires controlled the region, and basically it was, you allowed ethnic groups to live where they live. The carving up of the Middle East was one of the worst disasters of foreign policy that the West has ever committed, and really one of the last great blunders of the British Empire, as far as I'm concerned. And unfortunately, the United States really has not learned the lessons from those other powers. Instead of being a more hands-off country, we've made the same mistakes. And in a lot of ways, those mistakes, they weren't necessarily mistakes. It was greed. Again, I recommend everyone read Diary of an Economic Hitman to learn more about how the CIA destabilized countries or installed basically puppet governments to benefit American businesses and U.S. trade abroad. It really tells you a lot about how foreign policy has gone wrong and how it's contributed to almost everything that the U.S. is going through and dealing with right now. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because after a while, you only need a military as powerful as the U.S. when you get into shit like this. That we've essentially become a new Roman Empire with everything that we're doing. And that's unsustainable, especially when you are allowing the home front to be destroyed. The American taxpayer is getting less bang for their buck than anybody else. I'm not for a lot of social programs and things like that, but it could definitely be argued that with the taxes that we have, if we reduce the military industrial complex and other programs that are not efficient, then yes, U.S. Citizens could have health care. They could have better retirement system, or we can reduce those taxes or eliminate them and allow the American people to have money for themselves to invest however they would want. So either way, we would have a huge benefit from changing what we're doing politically. But the fact of the matter is the US dollar is the one world currency already. That is it. We always want to try to avoid a one world currency. The fact of the matter is we have one. It's the US dollar, and the United States will do anything in order to maintain its financial power in the world. And that's what leads to some decisions that are stupid logically, but make sense financially. If you think that a racket is financially sound. So this is why we are where we are. There are more things, the Fed, all that stuff, getting off the gold standard, stealing gold from the American people in the 1930s. All of these have had domino effects. Obviously, World War II and the U.S. being the top Western country after that. It's all led up to this point. the sad thing is that you would think that we would have learned from the mistakes of other great powers throughout history. So, at Westward Smile, and I agree with that too. I would rather keep the same amount of taxes and give health care to all than ever fund war. Yeah, unless a war is necessary for retaliation for an attack. I would agree with that too. That's not a very conservative position. At the same time, if you're going to take money from me, give it to me in a way that would benefit me. Make my taxpayer dollars go to something. I used to wear the hat all the time, make taxation theft again. So you guys know how I feel about taxes. I'm definitely on the libertarian scale of that. But at the very least, give me the ability to get something out of this. If you're stealing money from me, at least give me something for it. You're not giving me anything. So it's terrible. So there's really no way out of this. I'd rather just not pay taxes on pretty much everything and decide how I spend my money myself. But a lot of people are irresponsible. They'll bankrupt themselves. That's what people will complain about. But at least give us the option. The market usually finds a way to solve a lot of problems. Problem is that the market and the government are colluding in this incestuous fascistic nature that's creating a lot of the problems that we have today. This is neo-fascism that we're dealing with in modern American society. And it's funny because we always accuse the left of being communists, but they're not. They're fascists. The elites are the fascists. The people on the ground that don't know any better, the peons, they think that they're socialists and communists, but they're really just the modern day brown shirts that are fighting for this authoritarianism. And that happens on the right too. Let's be honest. We've got two sides of the same coin here. In a lot of cases, a lot of backdoor deals going on. I mean, look at the border policy that's going through the Senate right now. The fact that some Republicans would want to sign on to that tells you everything you need to know about the uniparty. So, don't be blinded by everything that you see out there just because it's one party or another. The fact of the matter is that the elites on both sides, the politicians that have been there for decades, they're running a racket that is taking advantage of the American people. And that's something that we need to have an awareness of. The only way that we can do something about that in the short term is voting for certain candidates that are against the machine, raising people up like a Vivek Ramaswamy. And let me read that from Hayden Wayne for 20. Speaking of being a new Roman Empire, have you read the book The Storm Before the Storm by Mike Duncan? It tells the story of Rome, where the major mistakes started up to what is the fall beginning. We are a mirror. We're a mirror. Great book. I will need to check that out, Hayden. Let me write that down. The Storm Before the Storm. I'm actually going to look it up right now, so that I've got that there. Let's check out the summary of that. The Storm Before the Storm. There we go. All right, let's read the description here together, shall we? The creator of the award-winning podcast series, The History of Rome and the Revolutions, brings to life the bloody battles, political machinations, and human drama that set the stage for the fall of the Roman Republic. The Roman Republic was one of the most remarkable achievements in the history of civilization. Beginning as a small city-state in central Italy, Rome gradually expanded into a wider world filled with petty tyrants, barbarian chieftains, and despotic kings. Throughout the centuries, Rome's model of cooperative and participatory government remained remarkably durable and unmatched in the history of the ancient world. In 146 BC, Rome finally emerged as the strongest power in the Mediterranean, but the very success of the Republic proved to be its undoing. The Republican system was unable to cope with the vast empire Rome now ruled. Rising economic inequality disrupted traditional ways of life. Endemic social and ethnic prejudice led to clashes over citizenship and voting rights. And rampant corruption and ruthless ambition sparked violent political clashes that cracked the once indestructible foundations of the Republic. Chronicling the years 146 to 78 BC, The Storm Before the Storm dives headlong into the first generation to face this treacherous new political environment. Abandoning the ancient principles of their forebears, men like Marius, Sulla, and Gracchi, and the Gracchi brothers set dangerous new precedents that would start the Republic on the road to destruction and provide a stark warning about what can happen to a civilization that has lost its way. That seems right on point. Hayden, thank you for that suggestion. I will definitely check that out and give it a read. Westward Smile with the $2 super chat. Two wings of the same bird. Yes, that is the Republican and Democrat parties here today. Yeah, like I said, I think the only way that we can kind of fix the system, short of a revolution, which I explained for those of you that watched last week, would probably end in disaster and the Third World War, would be you've got to take the system over from within. You really have to. I know a lot of people are very cynical that this will be the last election if Trump doesn't get elected or things like that, or, we'll become an authoritarian regime. And obviously the left is, talks about, Trump being a dictator and all this stuff. So everybody's freaking out about all this, about everything that's going on. But we really need to cultivate young new leaders. That's what we need to do. We need the guys like Vivek. Ron DeSantis, if he can be redeemed, at least has set a great example in this state. And he's made a lot of statements as of late that are like, well, this is the old DeSantis, man. Like, what happened to this guy? When he ran for president, he just kind of, he was a fool. Governor DeSantis is better than presidential candidate Ron DeSantis. So, and we've seen a lot of the leadership that we're seeing out of governors in the border states and things like that. It may lead to some sort of confrontation, or maybe this is another clash within history, like we've had in the past, where the states have invoked some of their sovereignties, because let's be honest, the states are supposed to have some sovereignty. People don't necessarily like this comparison, but the EU is a lot closer to, in many ways, of how the US is supposed to be, or how the republic was supposed to be. That states have some of their own sovereignty. The federal government takes care of, monetary policy and trade, war, border defense, things like that. That's what the federal government is supposed to do. Interstate commerce, all that kind of stuff. The states, pretty much handle everything else. And that's the way it was supposed to be. They were supposed to be the laboratories of democracy, so to speak. And eventually the hope was that each state would do things a little bit differently. Some states would fail. Some states would succeed greatly. And ultimately, you're not supposed to have a federal government that bails these things out. You would allow the voters, the American people, to say, you know what? California is doing a really crappy job with some of this stuff and some of these, policies that they have. Texas and Florida are doing really well. Maybe we should vote for some of these policies ourselves. Instead, we have a federal government now that has become bloated and too powerful, and the states have lost a lot of that sovereignty. We don't vote for our, the state legislatures don't choose the senators anymore. So that's taken away a lot of their power and their sovereignty. That's the way that the system was supposed to work. We moved away from that, honestly, because I think we got lazy and we wanted the federal government to do more power. The Civil War obviously traumatized a lot of people. It was a terrible, a terrible moment for this country. We had 500,000 Americans dead, from both sides. And we never fully recovered from that because we didn't really pay attention to some of the lessons that we should have learned there. And instead we decided, well, in order to prevent this from happening again, we're going to empower the federal government. Okay, maybe we should have looked at the moralistic issues that led to the Civil War beginning instead of giving the federal government more power. And they've done nothing but amass more and more of it each and every day, each and every year, since then. I got some tea. Somebody suggested tea. This is actually really awesome Puerto Rico frog mug here. I'm surprised the green screen didn't totally take it away. So bear with me here. Yep, Vorpal Snack is absolutely correct. Woodrow Wilson started a lot of this too. We got income taxes and things like that. Obviously, he wanted to start the League of Nations. There's a lot of terrible things. Wilson's one of the worst presidents that we've ever had in this country. And, we've seen just the bloating of the state, and it just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, essentially. It's a monster that exists to justify its own existence, and that's where we are. And that's why it took like 150 years to really change and build this monster. I hope it doesn't take 150 years to rein it down, but it is going to take time. Unfortunately, as much as I would love to, dismantle wholesale, like do what the president of Argentina is doing. And maybe to some extent you can do that. There are a lot of extraneous departments that exist within the U.S. Federal government that can definitely be eliminated. There's a lot of redundancy. We don't necessarily need multiple intelligence agencies. That doesn't make any sense. That do a lot of the same things. You don't need the FBI when Homeland Security, the DEA, and the Secret Service do a lot of what can fill that role. We obviously don't need to have as many overseas bases. We should empower our allies. I think that the war in Ukraine has been a wake-up call for a lot of the European Union and our NATO allies to start building up their militaries again. It's going to take them decades to do that, and a lot of them are still not going to want to when they have the U.S., funding everything and protecting all of them. But this is really what has to change, because we need to worry about ourselves as an individual. We cannot be the world police anymore, as much as we've gotten used to that. And, both sides of the aisle have embraced this role now. And part of it is through greed. Again, we want to maintain the primacy of the US dollar, or the supremacy of the US dollar throughout the world. That's very beneficial to us. We can manipulate economies the world over with that power. But it's not going to happen overnight, unfortunately. A lot of these systems are ingrained. It would be painfully purposeful. It's purposely painful to dismantle them. So we have to do it the right way. We have to take the steps in the right direction. And we need to make sure that there isn't some sort of power vacuum where by eliminating some organizations, we just create another monster now. So we have less organizations that now have even more power than before. No, part of it comes to limiting the power of the federal government, empowering the states where we can. And really, again, it comes down to the personal responsibility of the American citizen. We have to get skin in the game. So yes, if we want decentralization, like JM the Elite Fan says, we need to pay attention to that. We have to participate. We have to, unfortunately, become the politicians, the city council members, the people in positions of authority. The only way to basically beat down the monster is from within. We have to become a part of it, and we have to make changes internally. We have to make changes when we vote, and we have to choose candidates that are intelligent, that understand the Constitution, believe in individual rights, that know how these things work, and that want to reduce the size of the government so that we can do it in a way that makes sense, and ultimately in a way that will benefit us, the people, better than empowering just different other bureaucrats within the federal government. So again, we also need to change the way that the budgetary system works. You wouldn't believe how many times I've spoken with people that work within the federal government, and if they don't spend their budgets in a fiscal year, then that money's taken away. And so they just go on a spending spree of buying bullshit products for their offices, whether it's chairs, computers, or other things that they don't need. They just waste the taxpayer dollar. And again, this comes to having a sense of morality and a sense of duty. People within the government should have a sense of duty that they serve we, the people. They serve the American taxpayer. And there's none of that there. There's no accountability. There's no personal responsibility in a lot of these bureaucratic positions. So we need to, do something about that. We need to have some accountability. We need to promote people that take their duty seriously. There are a lot of people doing great work out there within the government. There are a lot of people out there who are trying to do the right thing. And there are a lot of people out there that are doing legitimate work, defending us every day. And they don't get credit for doing that work. We need to empower people like that. Analysts, actual agents, people that work in the field, people that actually interface with the American people, and limit the power of bureaucrats that just sit in their offices all day making, $200,000 or $300,000 a year. The Faucis of the world, for example, and, fire those guys, empower people that actually care, have some personal responsibility and accountability, try to instill a sense of honor in people that work in these organizations, and then ultimately reduce the size of them, because people will say, this isn't necessary anymore. So those are just some of the things we can do. And we've reached 91 people here. I think we're at 94. This is a new record for the Puerto Rican Pistolero here. This is awesome. I appreciate all of you joining me here tonight. We still got about 20 minutes left in the show. So let's continue on what we're reading here about what was going on in Iran, or with the airstrikes in the Middle East. And let's get back to it. Give me 1 second here. And I'm going to go off camera for a second, but I'm going to continue reading. I got to adjust something here. During damage report during a Friday night briefing, Lieutenant General Douglas Sims II, Director of Operations for the Joint Staff, told reporters that the airstrikes were meant to limit civilian casualties and damage the ability of the IGRC, so I'm Iranian Republican Guard, I think. Sorry, drinking some water. I did not drink enough water today. To continue carrying out attacks. While the Pentagon has yet to release a bomb damage assessment, the London-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said while 23 militia members were killed in and around Deir ez-Zor in eastern Syria, the ultimate damage to their operations was limited. Oh, man, what do I have here? I've got like a frame around me now all of a sudden. Look at that. These are remnants from old themes here. SOHR stated that 13 militia members were killed in American airstrikes on positions in Al Mayadeen city, while another 10 were killed in airstrikes on positions in Deir ez-Zor countryside. There's an ongoing state of alert, redeployment, and repositioning of Iranian militias and the evacuation of many positions for fear of more strikes in the coming hours. SOHR reported the American strikes on Iranian militias in the areas of Deir ez-Zor and its countryside caused confusion for those militias, but they do not end the Iranian presence in the region, as Iran has at least 20,000 Syrian and non-Syrian fighters spread over a geographic area extending from al-Bokamal on the Syrian-Iraqi border, passing through Al-Mayadeen and Deir ez-Zor, all the way to Jabal al-Bushri, the depth of the Syrian desert, and the T2 station. And we can see here on the map where these areas were targeted. And again, you can kind of see what I spoke about last week, that Iraq was a very easy country for the United States to invade. It's all flat. And you can see that Iran is a hugely mountainous region, and we don't have any access to the capital, which is all the way to the north and center of the country. So it would be very difficult to militarily, I mean, could the U.S. do it? Sure. I mean, we're capable of doing almost anything, but do we have the will to do it? Would we want to, I wouldn't want to fight in this war. I wouldn't want to fight for this president. I don't want to fight in an unnecessary war as it is. So, I mean, you're going to get that. We don't have the assets in place to be able to, conduct that kind of operation. We know that airstrikes don't work, they don't work to suppress an enemy entirely. It's not going to happen. And obviously the damage that Tehran could commit to shipping oil production and all of that in the region would be pretty devastating. So we would end up with gas prices exploding here in this country. Even though we could produce our own oil, we're going to be exporting a lot of it to compensate for it. So the supply chain issues would be a problem. And who knows, would China get involved in that case too? Is that part of the reason why we don't do it? They get so much oil from this region. So would they be pissed off and try to do something about it, or even provide Iran with weaponry? Who knows? SOHR added that there have been intense fights by American drones over al-Bokamal city in the eastern countryside of Deir ez-Zor near the Syrian-Iraqi border to monitor the developments and follow the movements in the region. Meanwhile, the Iranian-backed militias in Iraq say airstrikes killed 16 members of Kataib Hezbollah and injured 25 others. The war zone cannot independently verify any of these claims. Still, at least one major militia ammunition storage site was totally destroyed by the airstrikes, as we noted earlier today in our own battle damage assessment based on available satellite imagery. Okay. The Red Sea, though the U.S. airstrikes were designed to stop further attacks, the militias have claimed additional attacks on U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria Saturday. The war zone is unable to independently confirm this. A U.S. defense official was unaware of such attacks. Fighting the Houthis. The Red Sea region, meanwhile, remains in turmoil. The militaries of the United States and the UK, with support from Australia, Bahrain, Canada, Denmark, the Netherlands, and New Zealand, conducted an additional round of proportionate and necessary strikes against 36 Houthi targets. 13 across 13 locations in Yemen in response to the Houthis' continued attacks against international commercial shipping as well as naval vessels transiting the Red Sea. Rebel scum is absolutely correct about this. China has been cementing relationships with Iran, Russia, Syria, Turkey, and tensions between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia are thawing. Yes, it's been a huge coup on their part. The fact that you could get two mortal enemies in Saudi Arabia and Iran to start cooperating on certain things, and that's because of the terrible leadership of this administration. When I would say that probably the best achievement of President Trump's presidency really was stabilizing the Middle East and establishing relationships with the allies we have there. A lot of these countries are bad. They are. There's nothing we can do about that. But if we keep the peace and at least and maintain stability, there's nothing that we can do for these countries as far as expanding women's rights, giving people equal rights, religious freedom. There's nothing we can do about that. We can't impose our will against a sovereign nation. We can try to spread ideas, but that's about it. So we have to work with people that we don't like. We have no choice over this. And that's something that we were willing to do in the past, and it worked out for peace. Now we've gone the opposite direction, and it has led to this escalation and destabilization. The Red Sea region, meanwhile, remains in turmoil. Okay, well, we read that. Earlier, U.S. Navy warships and aircraft carried out a number of attacks on Iranian-backed Houthi forces in Yemen, as well as defended against aerial threats in the past 24 hours. According to the U.S. Central Command, those actions and others taken by the command were separate preemptive strikes, a U.S. official told the War Zone. At about 7:20 p.m. local time, CENTCOM forces carried out a preemptive strike against 6 Houthi anti-ship cruise missiles preparing to launch against ships in the Red Sea, CENTCOM said. Followed several engagements against the Houthis on February 2nd. At about 10:30 a.m. local time, the Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer USS Carney engaged and shot down 1 UAV over the Gulf of Aden, CENTCOM said. There were no injuries or damage reported. Later that same day, at approximately 4:40 p.m. local time, CENTCOM forces conducted strikes against 4 Houthi UAVs that were prepared to launch, presenting an imminent threat to merchant vessels and the U.S. Navy ships in the region. U.S. forces subsequently struck and destroyed the UAVs in self-defense. Then at 9:20 p.m. local time, the Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer USS Laboon, DGG-58 pictured below, and FA-18s from the Dwight D. Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group engaged and shot down 7 UAVs over the Red Sea. There were no injuries or damage reported. What now? We asked former CENTCOM commander and retired Army General Joseph Votel, now a distinguished senior fellow at the Middle East Institute, for some insights on how this all plays out. The War Zone, did the IGRCC or did the IRGC and proxies have too much time to prepare? General Votel said probably, but this may have been unavoidable for several reasons. First off, they knew immediately they'd crossed a red line, likely scattered. Second, the U.S. was always going to be deliberate about this strike. It's the way we do things, so we were bound to miss a few opportunities. Finally, the weather was bad this week. I suspect they may have wanted to wait until it cleared to support precision and post-strike assessment. The War Zone, did you see this having any real deterrence? Why or why not? JV said, it was important to strike in both scope and scale. Like all strikes, the effects will be fleeting. Terrorist organizations and militias are adaptable and often capable of recovering from these strikes. That's why constant pressure is so important to wear them down significantly. Significantly attrit. That must be a typo. I'm not sure. Their capabilities and will. We will have to be patient and see what the rest of the campaign looks like. Clearly, this is a strong message to Iran that we can do what we want to them. I think that was the subliminal message behind the employment of B-1s. Yeah, I did think the B-1 bombers were very interesting. They're kind of a Cold War relic. If you've ever seen a B-1 bomber, let's bring up a photo here. It's a classic. It's definitely a beauty. As somebody who wanted to be a pilot, this is one of the more badass bombers that we've got. So it's a swing wing design. It can go supersonic, I believe, and it's a long range strategic bomber. It's not stealthy at all, though. So typically, in a lot of these types of raids, we would send B-2 stealth bombers from, I believe, Missouri, and there's going to be mid-air refueling. Sometimes we go from Diego Garcia to in the Indian Ocean, and we conduct those strikes. So I can see why using the B-1 is basically like, this is a big ass jet that you're going to see coming from hundreds of miles away, and you can't do anything about it, so screw you. So, I can understand that kind of assessment. Some of these targets may require reattack and should expand to the broader Iranian-supported militia network. We must also look at verifying at very specific Iranian targets in Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. We need to keep Iran thinking about its vulnerabilities across the region and our ability to strike them at will. Oh, excuse me. Several Iranian proxies have threatened further attacks against the U.S. in retaliation, while the Iraqis have condemned the U.S. strikes. Do you see this further escalating the situation? JV, again, we will have to wait and see. I think it's possible that we would see some reaction by the Houthis, who are trying to posture as the most engaged part of the axis of resistance. We would also see some attacks by militia groups in Iraq and Syria trying to make a name for themselves. The war zone from the messaging coming out of Tehran. What's your sense of how the Iranians will react? JV, I think that we'll talk a lot, but wait and see how this plays out. They will be wondering what's coming next and how their activities around the region may be further struck or impacted. They also have to be thinking about our capabilities, elements of power, diplomacy, info ops, economic, cyber, and special operations forces and the intelligence community's capabilities. It's important for the U.S. to keep reminding everyone that Iran is the source for all these problems on the periphery of the Gaza conflict. U.S. officials say Friday night's attack were just the first in a series. I believe that they're going to go on for 2 weeks or so. How many more targets will be hit, how much damage is caused, and whether these operations will truly deter future deadly attacks against U.S. personnel in the region are all unknowns at this point in time. So yes, the drama and the endless cycle in the Middle East continues, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know what to tell you. Hopefully this doesn't escalate any further. And you know, the Iranians, look, the Iranians also know they don't want to escalate. Again, like I said, their hold on their power is tenuous again with the Iranian people. So I think that's something that we have to take into account with how we deal with them. Obviously, we are in the region now. We're not going to withdraw. We're not going to get rid of our bases. We're not going to abandon the allies that we have or the commitments that we have, you know, overnight. That's not going to happen. Any sort of withdrawal from the region and change in policy is going to take months or years. And so, unfortunately, while we're there, we have to do what we do. You know, we have to defend our forces in the area. The problem is, do we trust the leaders that we have, the political leaders that we have in this country to do the right thing? Do we trust, you know, the military-industrial complex not to push certain buttons? That's the real question, isn't it? We don't, because we've seen how this has played out. But it does seem that this is the way of the world. The U.S. always launches airstrikes and things escalate or change. So it's just, you know, it's just the way it's going to work. Yeah, neocons are going to neocon. That's pretty much it. And you know, we will see how these things play out in the future. Hopefully, it won't have too much blowback against us. I'm going to use the last few minutes here to actually talk about something that I did not have labeled here. And that is a show that I've been watching, which has turned out to be very excellent so far. It comes in the kind of, I would almost call it, I wouldn't say a sequel because these shows aren't necessarily related to one another, but I would say it's the newest in kind of the Band of Brothers. So what started with Saving Private Ryan and continued on with Band of Brothers, that great miniseries. The Pacific is also another fantastic miniseries that outlines the struggles of U.S. Marines and fighting against Japan. Band of Brothers, obviously, about the U.S. Army and operations in Western Europe, is Masters of the Sky. And I just think it's on Apple TV. Unfortunately, Apple TV has a lot of really good shows that I've watched lately. And I think it's fantastic. It follows the story of the 100th Bomber Squadron or Bomber Group in World War II flying out of England. And I think it does a better job than I've ever seen. Doesn't matter whether it's movie, TV show, or even documentary, of showing how horrifyingly awful it was to be in a B-17 during World War II. It is fantastic. It is not woke at all. It is. See, this is always the weird. This is always the weird thing. It's very strange that as bad as Steven Spielberg is and Tom Hanks, they are the executive producers on this show, that when it comes to World War II documentaries or World War II shows, I should say, they do an excellent job of showing things. And obviously, this is it's a show about men, and the men are men. They are. This is a good job of portraying that old school masculine American male patriotism, while also blending it in with the reality of war and the horror of war, because it really shows what it's like to be in those bombers, to feel almost helpless when, you know, you've got BF 109s or Focke-Wulf 190 fighters, you know, bearing down on you, the tension and abject terror of having to fly hot, straight, and level through enemy flak and anti-air fire, and really being completely helpless. And even the small things like dealing with training accidents, dealing with malfunctions of landing gear, dealing with stupid injuries that may happen, guys getting drunk and getting in bar fights. And it does a great job of showing that. Even the rivalry between the U.S. Army Air Force, which, for those of you that don't know, the Air Force was part of the Army in World War II, and you know, the Royal Air Force, the RAF, because the RAF conducted night bombing operations, and they basically committed indiscriminate bombing of German territory, and the U.S. tried daytime precision bombing, because obviously we didn't have guided munitions, you know, like we have today. But it's interesting to see how primitive the technology was, but also how sophisticated it was in other ways. You know, you have radar guided flak. You have the Norton bomb sight, which was overblown in its effectiveness, obviously, but it was pretty interesting. And seeing how you have a combination of these young guys that are straight out of, you know, farm boys of the Midwest, going into these aircraft, flying thousands of miles away from home, and not knowing what to expect. And it really is interesting to see, because, you know, we think of pilots being above the fray most of the time. And maybe in modern aviation, the combat is completely different. We have guided munitions. Most air-to-air engagements happen, you know, dozens of miles away from one another, and you'll never see the other aircraft that you're engaging. So there's a different type of tension and fear that you have to deal with. But here, you're flying aircraft that don't have computers, that everything is down to strength and grit and mechanical know-how. These ground crews, that's another thing that they really show, just how beat up these bombers get, that they're just completely shot to hell. You can see that in that frame there. And these ground crews put them back together for the next mission. It's crazy. This is the type of stuff that you don't see nowadays, because, let's be honest, modern fighters, especially stealth aircraft, are so sophisticated that if they take any sort of damage, they're not easily fixable in the field. They've got to go back to the factory, or you count them as a loss. Maybe something like an A-10 Warthog, we can see that. F-18s, we can see that. They're actually pretty hardy aircraft, but it's not the same as what we see now. Epic Mike in the chat, what's going on? So, and it is, and it's crazy to see, because, yeah, as 42 Chilled pointed out, as the war progressed, we saw advancements in different bombers. You know, we had the B-17s, which is the Flying Fortress, which is the focus of this show. We had the B-24 Liberators, and then eventually we got to the B-29 Super Fortresses that had pressurized cabins and much more sophisticated equipment. And those are the ones that dropped the atomic bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima in Japan later on in the war. So you can see the innovation and the evolution of tactics. You can see how dangerous it was early on in the air campaign when these bombers flew into, you know, occupied Europe without any sort of escorts. And I've seen from the trailers and from the intro, the intro song, they show different scenes showing P-51 Mustangs, which were the fighters that had the range to be able to escort these bombers all the way to their targets and back. And that just changed the entire game and made these raids a lot safer for these pilots. And obviously the deterioration of the Luftwaffe, the Nazi Air Force, or the German Air Force, I should say, because the modern German Air Force is so-called Luftwaffe. They deteriorated as the war went on. I don't know if they'll show Me-262s, which was the first, jet fighter that the Nazis had, and all that. They're going to show POW camps. So it's a different perspective that we haven't seen that much. And a lot of times we also see the perspective of fighter pilots, because that's what's sexy. Let's be honest. Everybody wanted to be a fighter pilot. Everybody thinks that that's awesome. And it's the coolest thing ever, seeing dogfights and things like that. But it is crazy to see, and how animalistic it is, because it really is. You know, the bombers have to fly like a herd. And when you see a herd of whether it's wildebeest or cattle or anything like that out there. In order to survive against predators, they have to maintain as tight of a formation as possible. And that's what these bombers had to do. And they had to essentially protect themselves because, the Luftwaffe fighters were wolves trying to hunt them down, and they would try to pick off the weak. If one bomber is damaged and starts straggling, they're basically done. And it's crazy to see how all that. And I love the commentary in the show. I think the acting has been great so far. The cast is pretty excellent. I've watched the first 2 episodes. There are 4 out right now. There's going to be 9 in total coming out every week. And I'm an aviation junkie. I always wanted to be a fighter pilot in the Navy. So this is up in my wheelhouse. I often say I was born in the wrong. I was born too late to be a dogfighter and too earlier to be a space fighter. So this is where I am today. So I watch these things, and it's great to see the realism behind it because, sometimes there's a romance associated, especially with World War II and being a fighter pilot or flying in bombers and things like that. And this just shows that it was just as horrifying in many cases as being a GI on the ground. And I think it does an excellent job. So if you've got Apple TV, if you can get a free trial or something like that, I would recommend everyone watch it. I think it's fantastic. And I think it does a good job portraying what it was like for these crews in World War II, the same way that the Pacific and Band of Brothers did. So yeah, that's what I've got. That's the show for today. I will be, the Halo series is coming out soon, and I'm going to watch it. Unfortunately, season 2. You guys know that I am a huge Halo fan. I've read most of the books. I've obviously played all the games, including Halo Wars, and I avoided the first season of Halo. I watched the first 2 episodes. I was disgusted and just threw that Paramount Plus away until I needed to watch Deep Space Nine. But now I'm going to... My loss, the loss of my sanity will be your gain, because I will try to do reviews of each episode. We'll see how it works. I've never done anything like that. I haven't decided whether I'm going to do it in a live stream format or if I will, record the videos and, try to edit them. We'll see. That it's something different for me. We'll see what the algorithm likes. I will try to do a pre-recorded review to begin with, and we'll see how quickly I can crank that out. So thank you, everybody, for hanging out. This was the best episode as far as attendance of Rolo's Rants, and that means a lot to me. I feel like each week it's been kind of different. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed the format. You guys know how I am. I've got ADD. I'm all over the place sometimes, and now I'm unleashed and unreined, running around by myself here without anyone to stop me from my insanity and going off on tangents. So I appreciate all of you being here every week, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one on Sunday. I am trying to line up a guest. That's one of the things that I love that we used to do on Locked and Loaded Latinos. I think some of the best episodes of that show were with guests. I have one that I'm trying to line up who I think will be fantastic. And with everything going on along the border and with the Texas National Guard and the Texas State Guard, they might be able to give us some insight when it comes to that stuff. So stay tuned for that, and take care, everyone. Much love and have a great week.
Do not come. Do not come.
Thank you for the kind words, Charles. I appreciate that. God bless you.